for quorum. George Lama.
Here.
Jack Duggan.
Aye.
And Bob Kelly. Doing. Hi, Bob, you here?
Oh, me? Yeah, I'm here.
Yep, just say hi. Okay. With a quorum present, I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I'm going to ask Grace, our moderator, to explain how the remote participation works before proceeding. Grace.
Hi guys, bear with me today. I don't know why my laptop is not working. Hold on one second. All right, working with two devices is difficult. Okay, thank you, Julie. As a precautionary measure to reduce the spread of the coronavirus, all town buildings are closed to the public, and the February 5th, 2021 Historical Commission Town Seal Subcommittee meeting will be held by remote participation. My name is Grace Rogers. I'm the Office Administrator for the Yarmouth Historic Commission and will be serving as moderator for this virtual meeting. Although no in-person attendance will be permitted, every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access and participate in the proceedings. Persons who would like to view or listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by watching via this virtual meeting or dialing into the number provided on the notice of meeting. We will also post a recording of this meeting on the Town of Yarmouth website as soon as we are able. Please be patient as we work to overcome any technological challenges with the virtual meeting. To reduce the confusion during the meeting, all audience participants of the virtual meeting enter the meeting muted. Participants will be unmuted when called upon to speak by the chair or moderator. If you are not speaking, please mute yourself to avoid unnecessary background noise. All votes must be roll call votes after a motion is made and that there's a second and the chair will ask for a roll call vote. For applicants and presenters will be made temporary panelists in order to share their screens while giving their presentation. All presenters and speakers need to identify themselves by first and last name for the public record. Non-presenting applicants can use the raise hand button or press *9 on their phone to identify themselves when they are called upon to speak. For public participation, comments or questions from the public will be taken by the discretion of the chair. Members of the public may speak by selecting the raise hand button and waiting for the chair to call on them to speak. If you are dialed into the number provided, press *9 on your phone to indicate that you would like to comment. Members of the public recognized by the chair are asked to identify themselves by first and last name and affiliation for the public record, and then provide their comment each time they speak. I'll now hand the meeting back to the chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. Sorry, I'm having a little technical difficulty. I was trying to print my agenda and so give me 1 second. Printed something else that was going on forever. Not that. It is. Did it print? Oh, that's it. Got it. Okay, sorry about that. I'm good. Okay, so we are going to just pick up our discussion of the seal. As last time, I think George is better suited to run our meeting, so I'm going to hand the position over to him for this meeting. George, thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Just a few housekeeping issues. I sent an email about an hour ago, a little late. You may not have looked at it, but it's a copy of the extracted transcript from our meeting, our last meeting. And when you look at it, you can see it's not real clean. It's not real neat. However, it does present a written document of the hour-long meeting, and it'll be helpful for doing minutes and for references as we make commitments to do certain things. It can act as a memory jog and so forth. So just one of the things in looking at the transcript, sometimes it's difficult to know who is speaking. So I just like to ask that if folks remember, but I'll also interject just if you could, when you start talking, if you could say, this is George, this is Jack, then we know when we look at the stream who's speaking. So just a housekeeping issue. Any questions, comments? Okay, so I did send the invite out to Miss Paula Peters regarding the meeting, and if she had availability to join us, and I have not heard back, and possibly she may tune in, but I did reach out and offered her the opportunity. So so I know we'll take a look at the minutes, but I think it would be helpful, Grace, if we could talk about where we are getting access to the digital town meetings and also access to paper records at the clerk department.
I emailed them a while ago. I haven't heard anything back yet. So I'm not sure. I think that we should narrow our focus down to what we would recommend to the selectmen right now, as in if the seal is appropriate or not, instead of broadening our search too much, if that makes sense.
So could you amplify as to how that would relate to looking at the historical information and background for presentation to the selectmen?
So from what I interpret from what Mark Forrest had said is that he's really looking at whether or not what is presented currently is appropriate or not. And although I understand gathering the historic information based on how we came to that, I think that it's okay to go through like a modern interpretation of what it means, because that's what people are going to look through the lens of it now, and about whether or not they want to go forward with the recommendation provided by the subcommittee. Because I know that Mark Forrest would like the selectmen to look over this, and I know that he seemed to have an inkling of a strategy going forward, including the public, about whether or not it should be redesigned or so forth, that he mentioned in the last time that he joined a meeting.
Anybody else want to weigh in on what Grace is suggesting? Jack, please.
I think I don't have any general disagreement with that. What I'd just like to add, though, that when it would be great to have access to those digitized records when we go forward to the selectmen with phase 1 of our report. We should have as much factual data as possible. Doesn't mean it has to be perfect, but one of the things I'd written down here to make a suggestion to this meeting, and kind of plays into what Grace said, is that I volunteer to create a timeline of how this seal came about. Not in great detail, but just, year, month and year, and a little bullet kind of thing to what we know. I think it's important to show that, when we go to the selectmen's meeting and to the public, beyond what we're doing here publicly, that we establish a line of credibility that we've actually looked into things, and we know as much as we can know. And which may be right where we are now. We may not, even if we got access to those digital records, maybe we wouldn't find anything more. But right now we know a couple of things. We know there were 2 acts of the state legislature 10 years apart, ordering towns to come up with these seals. We have a couple of reference points when things like the register and town records show the seal began to appear. But it just shows, it shows that we've done due diligence and serious research. And, it may be that we're never going to find anything that explains why they chose this representation of a Native American, why they chose the island, the schooner, the pine tree. But before you tell the selectmen what we would recommend to do, we need to tell them some facts, at least as much as we know them. So I would still like to try to get access to those records. And I know Bob would too. We all would, but that's sort of where I come out. I think we pretty much know what's wrong with this seal, what's inaccurate. But in terms of explaining, why they chose to do what they did, who knows? This is Jack speaking, George.
Oh, I wasn't sure. Thank you, Jack. Mr. Bob, you're up.
Yeah, this is Bob Kelly, Commissioner. I have three things that I'd like to talk about. I sent about 2.5 weeks ago the history of the Massachusetts seal. And I don't know if anybody read through that, but some very significant things came out of that, which show a precedence of how the seal was changed given the times that they were in. And not to belabor anything, but I would like to go through just a little bit of it. There were 6 seals that were that had been in Massachusetts state level. The first one lasted 63 years, and it depicted a Native American holding a bow and holding an arrow downward. What's significant about this is the explanation. It was by King Charles I, with the little caption, "Come over and help us." So there was this feeling in England that they needed help by the English, which we know is wrong. They didn't need any help. They needed help to probably get away from the English, but be as it may. That seal lasted for 63 years, with the exception of a 3-year period of time where the king interjected the seal of England, the royal seal, which only lasted 3 years, and then the original seal was reverted back to. It takes us to the Revolution, and during the Revolution, this is the first appearance of a sword, and it is because of the times. It was done in 1775, and the engraver was Paul Revere, and there are no Native Americans in this. It's the sign of the times. They were at war, and it shows a colonist holding a sword and I think a copy of the Magna Carta. I'm not quite sure. And then in 5 years after the war was over in 1780, Paul Revere again made another seal, which brought back the Native American within the seal. However, that is where the sword over the head of the Native American first appears. So, and there's no explanation for that. And then, of course, the last one was adopted in the 1890s, where they really didn't change it that much. But what I took from this was that in the beginning, there was a recognition of the Native American, even though that recognition was under the wrong context. There is nothing much English about that seal. And that all completely changed in 1775 to war. And quickly after the war was changed again to a Native American, but still the the citation is, "By the sword we seek peace, but peace only under liberty." And I think that's a bad place for the sword. And I think it also was misunderstood, probably is being misunderstood by a lot of people. There weren't a whole lot of Native Americans left in 1775. So anyhow, that was my first. So there's some precedent here for changing the seal, given the times, specifically. And then I sent that out, and I also sent this out. It was a chapter 42 about the seal. And there's an editor's note in here that says the chapter was derived from sections 2.01 and 2.02 of the Town of Yarmouth bylaws and was originally adopted in 1915. So I'm thinking maybe we should look at the bylaws for that exact year. And it was in that also described the current seal. So there's that. And then the last thing I have is that I was very encouraged by George reaching out to Paula Peters and her response to that, which was, "Thanks for your consideration. Mark Forrest is right to question the authority of your town seal. As someone who has recently been asked to serve on a committee to redesign the state seal, I can advise you on the elements of the current seal that are inaccurate. If you are looking for a consultant or making a new seal and have a budget, you should identify a scope of work, and I can make some recommendations." What's interesting about this is what Grace said initially in this meeting was, what can we present to the selectmen that should be corrected? And I do believe that at least in part, Paula Peters could play a role in that. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Bob. Julie?
Hi, it's Julie talking. I agree with Jack's idea for like a timeline. I think not only should the timeline include like the dates when the seal was designed and put into effect and things like that, but also I think more currently we need to have in there when there was somebody from the town that contacted us to kind of even bring this to our attention, that they thought it should be changed, just a citizen. Like, we've been, approached by a citizen of the town to look at this, and then, probably also looking into the dates approximately when they started working on the state seal. I think that proves like relevance, that this isn't just something that we've just decided to do out of nowhere. Like, there's other precedent, like Bob is saying, describing the state seal, that also figures into kind of what we're doing. Like, well, the state's trying to fix it too. See, they're working on that. We're trying to go along with that and be conscious of the same types of things. So I think that should be part of the timeline. Like, we recognize that the state seal is being worked on. We've heard from people in our town that they feel this should be changed. And now we're here, and we want to make recommendations to change it for similar reasons. And I think it should be something brief, just to kind of get our idea in front of them so that they can make the decision, and then we can delve more deeply into it. So I really like Jack's idea of a timeline. I think it's simple. It hits all the specific points, and that might be all we really need at this time, to get a start on it, to get approval, and then we can go more into research and looking at town files and things like that. That's where I sit with it. And I read all of that stuff about the state seal, and I found it very interesting. And I don't know if you all got a chance to look at some of the stuff I found, but there's tons of towns in the past several years that are doing very similar things. So I think that could be relevant as well. Like, hey, it's not just us. Like, all these towns are seeing these flaws and they want to correct them as well. That's all I got.
Thank you, Julie. Bob Kelly, you're up.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention one thing. In the reading of that state seal, it occurred to me that every town had to have an official mark. And so I was reading that and formulating in my head, well, if something official came from the town of Yarmouth to go to Boston, there would have been some kind of mark. My guess is this wasn't the first seal that Yarmouth had. And it would be great if we could find something on a document somewhere that shows that.
Thank you, Bob. Jack, you're up.
I've got right in front of me here, and I can't remember whether I sent this around when we first started out on this task, but one of the searches down at Sturgis Library of the Register, I found a story in there. The Register date is February 1st, 1913, and there's an actual picture of the seal that we see today. So we know that it's in existence. There's previous references in the Register to a town seal, but there's no representation. But this is actually right here, and it's the black and white version, of course, but it's the same as we're working with today. Incidentally, Julie, a asterisk to one of the things that you sent around from one of those towns back in 2007, in which they have, I'll just leave the town unmentioned. They had an effort to make a change back then, and there was some significant pushback. And I went to that town's website, and they're still working with the same inaccurate seal. Go figure. Anyway, we've got something as early as in writing, Bob, as of 1913, with the actual seal on it. But you know, this is all absent the touchy-feely, nitty-gritty details of who designed it. Was there any direction? Was there, you know, you used the comment that Paula Peters made about a scope of work. Was there a scope of work when back in, you know, when this first thing was, the town meeting said, go get a seal? Who knows?
Thank you, Jack. Miss Julie, you're up.
Thanks. Yeah, Bob was saying something about there was probably another seal before the one that we see today. And I know I was looking, I believe it's like Natick, and they have like a very basic seal that's like just a circle with like the word Natick in the middle and like incorporated. And that's probably more along the lines of what a lot of towns had, just like you're saying, to send correspondence, like, you know, like a rubber or like a wax seal on a document. It's probably something very similar, just like, you know, something they made with just the name of the town, so that when it was received at the state level, they know where it came from. But it may not have been something like official, but more like a signature, like, you know, the Kings of England used or whatever back in the day with their wax. So that's probably what they used, but it didn't have anything fancy on it. That's
great. Thank you, Julie. If I could summarize, and I think we've all hit on some important points, and you know, I was going to offer early on, but you know, this conversation kind of reinforces it, and I think we're all thinking the same thing, is constructing a presentation to the select board that's that is easy to understand. It's graphical and descriptive, and then behind that, and we talked about this, previously, similarly to what we did with the Indian Memorial, is we will be able to direct people, and my suggestion would be we could put it up on the Yarmouth Historical Commission website, all of the backup documentation, because again, this is our opportunity for posterity to say, here's what we found from an historical basis going back to 1888 up to present. And you can go here to find more detailed information. And and Grace, you're absolutely right. And Mark stated it. We need to create an executive summary to present to the executive board. Exactly the who, what, when, where, and if we can discern why. That's what we do here in the Historical Commission. And so if I might, put out to the committee that that in envisioning a presentation, I would envision that it's not going to be just one talking head, that it's just not going to be me, it's not going to be Julie. However, it should be several of us if people are willing to do that. So, and again, just in thinking about structure, what Bob is working on, and as the town historian and historian in general, is the important historical perspective. What Jack and Julie are talking about is the granularity on the seals. And then, as Grace suggested at the last meeting, and I think we all agree, it's important to look at the imagery and make our recommendations ultimately on that. And I'd love to work with you, Grace, on that. So we kind of have like a distribution of areas, key areas that we want to cover, and clearly there'll be overlap, but at least we got parallel paths working, again, with the ultimate view of our presentation to the board. And again, you're absolutely right, Grace. We're just looking at phase one. And then if we're so ordered, we'll jump into phase two. So I'd open that up for further discussion. Thank you. Mr. Jack?
One thing I just want to make clear, because I'm a little bit confused in my mind, but I maybe 10% confused. We, the subcommittee, are going to do two things here. I want to make sure I'm understanding this right. One is we're going to go before the select board with a participation, with a response to the request. And then the assumption is they're going to absorb this and give us some direction back to come up with. Let's just make an assumption. They're going to say, yes, we need to correct this. Here's what we'd like you to do. And then we go back into phase two, which, we're already crossing the lines here into phase one and phase two. Simply, it just comes with the territory. But am I right? We're going to have two sessions with the selectmen, and I'm going to assume that they're going to say, yeah, we want to move ahead. I will point out at the risk of being somewhat indelicate, that when the Mashpee, town of Mashpee dealt with the issue of changing their seal, it was a petitioned article, and the selectmen and the finance committee did not recommend. That said, the town meeting overwhelmingly approved the petition article to call for change. But I say that by way of pointing out there's a range of opinion that happened in that town, and in the other town I mentioned that raised questions and never changed the seal. Related to this, at some point, George, we need to figure out a way we as a subcommittee, to get some public participation in our sessions. These are public meetings that we're having today included. And you invited Paula Peters to participate. But I think we need to figure out whether we want to get some public participation and some Native American participation into this before we go before the selectmen. I think it's probably important to do that. And it's I wish Ms. Peters had been here today, but we can reach out to other representatives of the Wampanoag tribe. We all have various contacts there. And, but anyway, thank you. I just want to make sure you're shaking your head. So I've got an understanding, right, George, that we're going to do this in 2 phases.
Yeah. Thank you, Jack. Yes, I mean that's the clear guidance. You know, I think intuitively we knew this was going to be the case, and Mark Forrest reinforced that. And your points are well taken. And because even before we get to the select board, as a subcommittee, we need to do a presentation to the full YAC committee. So and your point is well taken, that at what stage do we decide that we should open it up? I mean, and your point that we are doing it because it's a public meeting. However, given all that's going on outside of our little ivory tower, people may not be, focusing on it. However, we have other avenues that we could possibly open it up, to the public and to the media. So good point. We should further discuss it, and we need to establish that before, obviously, we make a presentation to the full board. Mr. Bob, let me take Mr. Bob, Jack, then back to you.
So there's a lot of cart before the horse. Bring in, the public and so forth. I would like to make a suggestion that, pursuant to what Grace said initially, that we kind of make a bullet point of talking points for a presentation, and that one or each of us or some of us attack certain pieces, and then we come together. For instance, I could maybe write a piece on the precedence of changing the seal, so people might feel more comfortable about it. For instance, Jack could maybe write something on, the specific history of Yarmouth, but if we have, some succinct topics, we could start to attack that, because if we don't sort of do the groundwork, if we introduce the public, you're going to get everything but the kitchen sink completely.
Thank you, Bob. Miss Julie, you're up. Did you have any comments?
Yeah, I do, actually. I agree with Bob. I think we need to definitely put together our kind of plan presentation first, and bring it before our full commission, and make sure that we're good with them. And then that's kind of like, I feel like a fielding ground, kind of, if everybody's like, yeah, good to go, then we know we're ready for the selectmen, and then we go through that. And then, looking ahead, hopefully the selectmen will agree and let us move on to phase 2. And that's when I think you could get more involvement from the public and others, where perhaps, like I noticed when I was doing research, a lot of the stuff I found was like articles in newspapers. Like perhaps if the selectmen approve it, then you're like, maybe someone can write an article about it. And that's one way to get the public to know about it. And then if we have another meeting, now people are familiar, if they see it, then we may have attendance or letters coming in, for or against. And then I think that might be the easiest way. But, before we get to that, basically, let's all decide maybe what we want to kind of tackle for presentation and get that set up so that we can at least at first present it to just our commission, and try not to get too far ahead of ourselves and try to focus on just this initial presentation that's just going to get our foot in the door for this one.
Thank you, Julie. Jack, and then I'll get to Bob. Mr. Jack?
Bob's completely right about cart before the horse. And Julie's right too about, or whoever it was that just said this, about we need to get our act together in terms of the best factual data points that we can collect before opening up to a full public participation. We're really still in our research phase here, because if we don't lay down a set of facts best as we know them, who knows what opinions are going to come flying in and out based on nothing but seat of the pants or whatever. So I think you're right, Julie and Bob. I'll volunteer right now to produce a timeline of what I know. You guys can send in to me little data points if you want right away, or you can wait until I have something and then respond to that. I've got a bunch of stuff that I collected. All of you have contributed something already in our earlier sessions, and I've got those kind of in a little file here too. I can draw on those, but I'll produce a timeline draft with a short 1-paragraph introduction that these are the facts as best as we can know them. I would really like to see, Grace, I don't want to put this solely on your back. Maybe we should go we should ask Karen to do this, but somebody needs to cut the knot, the Gordian knot, on getting us access to from the IT department in town to those digitized records. It's you never know what you're going to find there. There's certainly a case to be made now that we should have access to it for this subcommittee's purposes, but I think you can make a broader case that any member or alternate member of the historical commission ought to have access to that data in the easiest way, and especially now in pandemic times where you don't necessarily want to go into town hall, and maybe town hall doesn't want any people in there who don't need to be there if they can do it some other way. So there's my volunteer, and Bob, once again, you're right on the money about the cart before the horse.
Miss Grace, and then I'll get to you, Bob.
Yeah, I will work on that. Again, I've been saturated with work to go up and actually, pull someone from the town clerk's office aside to work this out. I will do that this upcoming week to make sure. My guess is that, which is something I could probably do, is they probably will just have to find where that information is. That's probably going to take the longest thing. If I could get into the vault myself and look, that would be nice. But I will speak to them this week to see what research that we can find on that and make accessible.
Bob, you're up.
Yes, this is Bob. Grace, I'd like to point out that there's something about the seal pursuant in the bylaws in 1915. I agree with what everybody's saying. And Julie, to break what you said down just a little bit more, I don't think we have to go to the public before we show the selectmen proposed issues. Because once we get a history written, get approval to move ahead into a second phase, that's when we probably would need to get an article, public opinion, and so forth. If we ask for it sooner, we're going to be sorry. That's my opinion. That's my.
Thanks, Bob. Miss Julie, you're up.
Thanks, Ms. Julie. Yes, Bob, that's exactly what I meant for not getting public involved during this first phase, but waiting definitely until after selectmen approval and when we're into phase 2. So yes, exactly. And I'd be willing to provide some background on the state seal from some of the stuff I've already looked at. I know Bob's also looked at it too, so perhaps we can both kind of put a little bit in there and make one combined thing on that together.
Yeah, this is Bob. I would suggest the elements of that there's some physical elements, and then there is the precedence. And I think it's important that when we talk to the selectmen, one of the things that we show is a progression, why things were changed, how it fit into the sign of the times, and how it changed just as rapidly when those times were over. So I'd like to work on that with you.
Thank you.
And again, just to reinforce, and to everybody's point, once we make our presentation to the select board, there'll be a lot of interest, and I would assume we'll get interest, from the Cape Cod Times and possibly other newspapers on the Cape. So again, a summary is important from an executive standpoint, and what we can put behind that for an industrious reporter or whatever to look at. If they're doing the job right, they'll look at all the background. And again, what we're looking to do is to create a record for posterity. So yes, Julie, as you're doing your work, have behind it, references to all the resources. So similar to what, we started to do at the very beginning, and I'll continue to do that. But again, if each individual group, pull all of your resource documentation together, and that ultimately will go up onto the website. Miss Grace, and let me throw this out, I think what I'm hearing is that that we know we've gleaned a lot of information from the public sector, and I would suggest that we hold off on looking to get into the vault, if we find large enough gaps or holes and we want to fill them at this stage, then yes, we can ask that. But again, given the current situation, I would suggest if we focus on just finding out the digital records are out there. They've been scanned. They're a public record. That's where I think that needs to be our focus, is how do we get to it? And Grace, your thoughts on that? If we just focus on that and hold off on the clerk.
Well, that's from what I've dug up so far, when I was looking around on the website, I couldn't find anything much earlier than I think the last decade in terms of meetings. So that is a problem. So that's why I wanted to go to the town clerks. And if they have information that's in paper, I can scan that in for everybody too and send it off. So that way we can crowdsource instead of having to to, work smarter instead of harder in COVID times. Yeah, because that's what I found on the website. And I know that there are you can have time cutoffs for some information. But I know that information as pertinent as the town seal would definitely be archived. But that's what I found on the website. I couldn't find anything much earlier than a decade in terms of meetings.
But if we go back to Pat Armstrong's statement of the last meeting, that all of the town meetings have been digitized. What does she mean that all of the town meetings have been digitized? So yes, please let's dig deeper into that to find out what exactly the effort was. And but I guess what I was alluding to is, if it's too much at this stage for Bob and for us to go down, a town hall, perhaps we hold off on that thrust. But to your point, just focus on the, digitize or whatever hard copy of the annual meetings. That would be helpful. Go ahead, Grace.
Okay, so two things. I might have to run a little early today, only
Yeah.
because I have to have a conference call with MHC in regards to our last meeting. And then also just keep in mind that we're talking about the bylaw that was enacted. If anything in the town seal ends up being changed, that would also trigger a bylaw amendment. So just to keep that in the back of your head as we go forward, because that will also be something we will most likely have to work on.
Absolutely, and ultimately any change has to go to town meeting. So so again, phase 2. But Mr. Jack.
Just one of the old business follow-up from the last meeting. I reached out to Duncan Oliver and asked him, what do you know anything about the town seal? And the answer was basically not much. But one of the things that we would, so that covers history of it. So that's Duncan looking back on all his readings and whatnot about town history. But there was more current town history point that I wonder if anybody followed up on. I think Pat was going to do this. Somebody was going to ask Bob Lawton what his memory was of any approaches to the town during his years at town hall as the town administrator and deputy town administrator. Did he have any recollection of individuals or groups requesting a relook at the town seal? And I don't know, George, if anything's been done about that, but it's good,
So thank you, Jack. And in looking at the transcript, clearly you can see the written word as to what the discussion points were, and yes, it was your suggestion, and to Pat. So what I will take as a to do is to go back through the transcript and just do a follow-up out to the interested party who is going to help on that. So and I think that's important when you look at putting that on the agenda going forward, so we have a record as to this was the ask, this is the response, and we'll just keep that on the agenda until we close it out and have information. So yep, we're covering a lot of ground, and we just need to summarize that. So I will do that. Okay, this was great. Unless anybody has anything else, I would suggest that we move along to the minutes and see if there's any discussion on those, and whether we would like to approve them. Ms. Grace?
Just in case I have to, because the call's at 11, but I just want to thank all of you guys for taking this so seriously and for doing such a good job. I really appreciate it. And I know the public and everybody, all the stakeholders as well, but it's nice seeing everybody be so passionate about it. So just thank you.
And thank you for being here with us. Any questions on the minutes? Any suggestions? I have a few minor ones around the adjournment, and I'll make those changes, Grace, and then send them off. So do we have a motion to accept the minutes?
I move to accept the minutes.
Bob Kelly moved to accept. Any second?
I'll second. Julie.
Miss Julie second. And roll call. Julie?
Aye.
Bob?
Good.
Aye.
Jack?
Aye.
George? Aye. Motion passes, minutes accepted. Thank you very much, guys. Exciting times, and let's keep trucking.
Should we just update our regular commission with what we've been talking about at our next regular meeting on the 11th?
That's a good suggestion. And thank you, Julie and Bob.
Yeah, let's book another meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what are the thoughts? A week and a half? Jack?
19th, 18th, 19th.
19th, Bob. I go with 19th.
19th looks good to me. Miss Julie?
Yeah, I have an appointment in Sandwich at 11, so I wouldn't be able to stay for the whole thing.
Okay.
Would Wednesday work for anybody, the 17th?
Which day, Julie? Wednesday?
Wednesday, the
February
17th?
17th
The 17th? Works for me.
works for
My
me.
busy calendar. Go to the dump, buy oyster.
17th is good for me.
Oh, great.
All right, so 17th at 10 o'clock, and I will follow back up with Miss Peters again to let her know the next time we're getting together, and if her schedule allows, you know, hopefully she can join us. And all right, great. So I think with all our business done, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
So moved by Jack Duggan, seconded.
Second, Bob.
Seconded by Bob. Roll call, Julie,
Yes.
Bob,
Yep.
Jack,
Yep.
George, aye, motion passed. Meeting adjourned.